So, and we are live. So thanks everyone for waiting. We are still studying new systems and how they integrate with each other. And yeah, this time it's me who messed up. So thanks a lot for your patience, and we are happy to start the webinar. So today we have Andreas Grubner, who will talk about putting observability into your continuous delivery and maybe continuous integration pipelines. And yeah, this is first CDF webinar after a long break. So, you see I wear a proper t-shirt today. And yeah, our goal is to talk about everything continuous delivery, Keptn interoperability. You're welcome to join the Keptn channels. You're welcome to join the CDF channels. I will be posting all of them in the Q&A and in the YouTube chat. And if you have any questions, also please use the YouTube chat, because this is where we can collect all the questions, and I will be asking Andy during the presentation. So that's it from me. And yeah, please welcome Andreas Grubner, also a CDF community ambassador.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for being the magician behind the scenes. I know sometimes we run into technical challenges, but you are great in also fixing them and getting everything up to speed. Welcome, everyone. Let me actually start sharing my screen, and I'm moving things around here on my screen. And let's make sure I'm sharing the right thing, which should be my slides. All right. So I do have a combination of a couple of slides, but not many, because I really want to show you Keptn live, and then hope to get a lot of questions from you. So see this as your opportunity to really get to know Keptn better. And also, if you have specific questions, then just let me know. So to get a little bit more information, my talk in 3 acts. So I want to first talk about what is Keptn for people that are not familiar with. I have a couple of new slides that I put together. Second thing is why we built Keptn, as a reminder on that we are not just solving a problem that has already been solved multiple times before. Well, people tried, but I really want to show you why we think we're different, and then how Keptn works, architecture, extensibility. So first of all, what is Keptn? For those that are new. For me, Keptn is an open event and data-driven automation framework for DevOps engineers and SREs. Now, today we talk a lot about continuous delivery, obviously, but to remind you what Keptn really allows you to do, it allows you to orchestrate multi-stage delivery. So you will later see me specifying a deployment task, a test task, a validation task, and then if everything is good, it gets released into the next stage. And but Keptn is more than that. So just for completeness, Keptn is not just focused on delivery. Keptn is really using the orchestration power that it has to also orchestrate what we call day 1 and day 2 operational tasks, meaning helping you to roll out your canaries into production or execute remediation actions. So think about this: if there's a problem that is coming in production after you've deployed something, Keptn can assess the situation, can then make a decision on what to do next. It could be a rollback, it could be a scale up. It always validates. And on that, either the situation is good, then perfect. If not, reassess the situation, try to figure out what next. Hopefully, eventually, this loop will end in a happy scenario where everything is going back to normal. If not, you can also escalate. Now, you may wonder, Andy, this is no different, right? This is just, if this, do this, then that, right? Well, I disagree here, because what we do as a very key component to all of this is Keptn makes data-driven decisions based on SLOs, service level objectives, which is a key component of site reliability engineering, or a key methodology. So what this really means, Keptn at the core connects to your observability platform or to any observability platform to pull in metrics, SLIs, that's what we call them. Initially, we started with Prometheus support, then we added Dynatrace support. The community just recently built DataDog, but nothing keeps you from implementing and connecting to any other observability platform that you have. Now, most importantly is that Keptn is not replacing your existing tools that you have for delivery, test, notification, ticketing, or configuration management. It connects to those tools. So really what it does, it's an orchestrator of sequences that then connect to your tool of choice at the right moment through standardized events. And this is a big thing again for us. We're working with the CDF and the CD events team to really standardize the way we communicate with all of these different tools. Because one big problem we want to solve, we don't want to be yet another tool that connects to other tools and connects them through a proprietary API. We really want to standardize the way we connect all of your different tools that you use right now in your tool belt. We want to connect them through a standard event mechanism. And at the core, we want to make data-driven decisions based on your observability data. All right. So a core component is the SLO-based evaluation, the data-driven decisions. And you will see later in my demo, and also if you know Keptn already, then the evaluation task is a core task of Keptn that you can place in any part of your automation sequence. Now, when the evaluation is processed, what that means is internally, and this is a service that comes with the Keptn control plane. When you install Keptn, it's so-called Lighthouse service. The Lighthouse service is the one that is reacting to the evaluation request. The first thing it does, it says, hey, show me the service level objectives that the user has specified. Service level objectives will be specified in a so-called SLO YAML. You can see here error rate, JVM memory, count DB calls, and you can specify pass and warning criteria, and also a total score. Now, the Lighthouse service itself is not retrieving data. For this, it sends an event that is then picked up by exactly your observability tool, whatever you have. So to give you two examples, if you have Prometheus or Dynatrace, you would therefore, or whoever is responsible for observability platform and knows how to get certain data, those teams can specify in the SLI YAML how to, for instance, query error rate, count DB calls, JVM memory, HTTP request, and you can see it for yourself, right? You basically specify the queries that are then executed by your observability platform. Right? We have so-called SLI services that can take care of this. Those integrations with the observability platform will then return the values. And then the Lighthouse service is really doing the job of taking the values that have been returned by your observability platform for a certain time frame. Let's say if you want to evaluate a test execution, you can give it the time frame for when you ran the load test. If you just did a production deployment, you can say, how is my production doing after 5, after 10, after 15 minutes? So the time frame is something that will flow into this. But the Lighthouse service is then retrieving the data, comparing every single data point against the objectives in your SLO, and then grades every single metric, and then comes up with a total score that we again normalize between 0 and 100. So this is at the core of Keptn. And also, I believe the reason why it is different, because we see a lot of other tools, you have these capabilities, but they're typically bolted on. For us, it is kind of core of Keptn. Now, let's see the whole thing in action. Let me just switch over to my browser. Here we go. All right. So first of all, if this is the first time you see Keptn, please, and you are interested in more, you can go to the Keptn website, keptn.sh. More information can also be found on our GitHub repositories. This is github.com/Keptn, our core repository, where you also find links, first of all, on how to contribute, how to join the Slack, how you also find additional organizations, Contrib and Sandbox, and also Sockshop for some demos. Again, all the information you need. Now, in my case, I have Keptn running here, and with running here, let me also quickly bring up my terminal window here. So what I have, Keptn itself runs on Kubernetes. That means you need some type of Kubernetes cluster. It can be, any of the big ones. If you go also to the cloud vendors, to the hyperscalers, an EKS, an AKS, a GKE. In my case, I just run a K3S lightweight Kubernetes. We also have tutorials to run on Kind. So any type of flavor will do. When you install Keptn, like in my case, you get the core components, and I just want to highlight a few. For instance, the bridge. This is the UI that you see in the back. We call this the bridge. What else do we have? The API gateway, right? That's an important one that actually gives you access to the API, because not only do we have a UI, but we also have an API that can be used to configure and to interact with Keptn and trigger automation. What else is interesting? The Lighthouse service. I mentioned this earlier, right? Lighthouse service is the one that is doing the evaluation. I also have, in my case, the Dynatrace service installed that is giving me the integration and the connection to my Dynatrace observability platform. I have Locust here as a testing tool. I have Argo here, Argo Rollouts, Helm, and so forth, right? And maybe at the very core, the shipyard controller, which will take care of a lot of the actual orchestration. So if you install it, lightweight, you get the idea. Now, Keptn itself is organized in projects. So I have different projects here, and I just want to start with the release validation, because this is what I see most people start with. I have my release validation project. By the way, I'm running here. Which version do I run? I run 14.1, which is, I think, the latest version out there. It really includes a couple of new cool things in the UI, in the bridge, to trigger sequences and so on. Now, the way a project is structured, you always have stages, at least one, but it can be multiple. I have a production stage, and then you can also have multiple services. Services, see them initially, we thought a service kind of reflects your microservice, but really service is just a configuration entity. It can then point to whatever you want to point it to, really, right? It's just a configuration entity. Now, in my case, I have my AAPL service. So in case you wonder, when I do my tutorials and my workshops typically include a scenario where I give my attendees, my workshop attendees, ownership of an app and they're responsible for it. And in order to separate them out, I used stock symbols, Apple, Acer, and then there's others. Like this is just a very small one, just for two, but you get the idea. Now, what's important here is, and this I want to show you kind of the core of Keptn and kind of the first use case. Here, this visualization actually really shows me what I think, why I think Keptn is so great. Because at the core, we allow you to ask Keptn, please do an evaluation. Remember the evaluation task. And what I've done here, every kind of column here, every column kind of represents when I asked Keptn to run an evaluation that was then pulling in different metrics, remember SLIs, from my observability platform, and is then comparing it to the objectives. Now, if I move the mouse over, you can actually see the individual values that are pulled back, and then also how it compared with the pass or warning criteria. And this is also why you see some of them are red, because here I missed the mark. The green ones are the good ones. And then also we are calculating a total score. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, there's a couple of things you see. First of all, you can see that we are also showing you everything in the table view, where every metric that was pulled back is shown here with the metric value. And then also with what it was compared to. You can have comparisons against a static threshold, or also against a previous comparison or a previous evaluation. So you can actually do regression detection. For every metric here, you can also see different weights. So you can weight every metric differently, because something might be more important than others. What else is there? The pass criteria, the warning criteria, the individual result, and then the score that this particular metric kind of contributed. And then we just normalize everything to 100, and that's it. Okay. You can also see here, I have some additional metadata executed by Andy, another build. You know what? Let me actually execute one more, because I want to show you something here. That's different. But I want to go to the sequence view. The sequence view shows me all of my previous evaluations that I ran. So I can click on and see every time Keptn triggered or executed an automation sequence. And this one, as I said, is the most basic one. Just evaluate. I can trigger a new sequence. And now this is actually really nice. A new UI component where I'm in the context of my release validation project. I can now trigger a so-called evaluation. I pick the service, and then I pick the stage. I click on next. Now, for the evaluation, I have two options. I can specify either a time frame, or I can use a start and an end. Time frame is nice because I can say, please evaluate the last, let's say, 30 minutes. right? This is a use case where you just ran a test and now you want to evaluate the metrics that just came in the last 30 minutes. You can also give it here labels. So build ID is a key label that I want to highlight here. You will see it later in different areas, but I can, for instance, say build, what do we have? CDF webinar April 26. I can do executed by equals Andy, and maybe it was triggered through, right? Obviously I'm now triggering it through my my UI here, but a very common use case would be to trigger this, let's say, from a GitHub action or from a Jenkins pipeline. So if you have, like, I don't know, myjenkins.myorg.com/job/my job, right? If this would be the job that triggers it, because you can also from Jenkins trigger this through an API, then we can pass in the link back as so-called label, and it will show up later in our UI again as metadata. It's also clickable. So if I click on trigger sequence, what happens now? I'm asking Keptn, please execute an evaluation sequence. I can see here the metadata, build CDF webinar April 26, executed by Andy, triggered through. So if an external tool would call it, great, I would get the link back. Now, this is now running, and here's what I wanted to highlight. I talked about events earlier, the way Keptn is actually interacting with external tools, but also with the internal tools like the Lighthouse service. All are the same. They all communicate through the same eventing standard. So first of all, when you trigger a sequence, you are just sending in a so-called cloud event with a particular data package here, or data payload. So here, the cloud event type is Keptn event production, because this is my stage. Evaluation triggered. It basically means please trigger the evaluation sequence in production. Now here's the project context, the service, and again the stage is twice here. And then there's some additional data like the labels, the metadata, also the time frame that I pasted in. Now what Keptn is really doing, it's now looking into my definition of my sequence. Now my sequence is very boring. There's only one task in there, the evaluation. Still, same concept. Keptn is then saying, all right, I now need to trigger the evaluation task. And in my case, it's the Lighthouse service that is picking it up. The Lighthouse service is then picking it up and says, hey, I'm ready to go. So the Lighthouse service then say, hey, I'm the Lighthouse service, and I'm just started the evaluation. So let me do my job, and so on and so forth. I'll show you in a second a little bit more of what else is possible, but I hope you get the idea. Also, a very key component is here under settings, where you have the option, first of all, to integrate other tools. So under settings, there's a section called uniform. This is where you see all of the integrations, all of the, we call them Keptn services, that are currently subscribing to those events. Now, there's a couple that come out of the box with your Keptn installation, like the remediation service, the Lighthouse, the approval, the webhook service. I additionally installed the Helm service and Argo service, the Dynatrace service, the Monaco, the Locust, and so on and so forth. And you can see here that these services, what they have in common, they run on a target platform, right? This means, while Keptn itself is the control plane that runs somewhere, like in my case on an EC2 machine, I can have other services that are listening to events and then reacting on it. I can have them installed anywhere. If you have multiple Kubernetes clusters, or even they don't have to be Kubernetes clusters, it can be a Windows system, it can be anywhere, where they can call to the control plane and say, hey, I am the Monaco service, the Dynatrace service, the Locust service, and I'm interested in a certain event. So please, I will poll you, and every time you have something to do for me, please give me that event. A very cool and out-of-the-box service is the so-called webhook service. And I like this in particular, and here's the reason why. Because the webhook service makes it super easy to just integrate any additional tool ad hoc on the fly. Because if you click on it, you can see here on the bottom, we have these subscriptions. So I've subscribed 2 events just to show you. One of them, and I've done this earlier this morning because I did another event, and I just said, hey, whenever the evaluation is finished, then I want to post it to a particular endpoint. So this is a webhook.site. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this this website, but it's a really convenient one where you just get a unique URL and you can just, it's basically for testing webhooks. And you can see here, just 2 minutes ago and a minute and a half ago, my webhook was triggered, and it seems that my latest evaluation just finished with a warning score, 86 points, and here's also the message. Now, why do I get this over here? Because if I go back to my definition, I basically said, whenever Keptn is done with the evaluation task, then I want to send a webhook to this endpoint, and then you can also specify here the payload. And the nice thing is you can pick any type of payload that comes with the cloud event for that particular event type. Right? So for instance, the git commit, the results, the score, this is all available. Now, this is something obviously that you wouldn't do. Like, I mean, this is just a dummy environment, but if this would be a token, we also give you secrets, custom headers. To show you another example, if I go back to integrations, go back to my webhook service, the second thing that I've done here, I have again said for evaluation finished, I want to make a post to my Slack API. So Slack provides webhooks as well. Here I put my Slack token into a secret, and then I'm just sending in, this is kind of the payload that Slack expects. So if I now go over here, then I can see at 6:23, now it's 3 minutes ago, I received also this message in Slack. The cool thing is I can just subscribe to an event and then I'll get the event. Now, I want to do a little bit more. I want to show you a little bit of kind of more an advanced use case, because we talk about delivery, but for me, this was important that you know that this is a common use case to really integrate this automated validation capability. Now, I have a delivery demo project, but also a demo rollout project, and that's the one I want to show you. The demo rollout project, this is where I have specified a little advanced or a little more advanced use case. And with more advanced, I mean, this is what we see a lot, people starting when they're interested in continuous delivery with Keptn. So here I have, as you can see, staging and production. In staging, I have a delivery sequence, and I actually executed this one, as you can see here, while I was at DevOps days last week. What this sequence does, again, from the outside, you trigger it the same way. You basically say, hey, I want to trigger the delivery sequence in staging. This is my automation project. This is the service context. Here's some metadata. Now for the delivery use case, you may want to add in configuration changes that you want to happen as part of that delivery sequence. So in my case, I will later on have our Helm integration where Helm can take a values block here under the configuration change block and can apply this to my values.yamls and then use Helm to actually apply my Helm chart. So this is what I'm putting in. Now, in my case, delivery has then a couple of sequences specified. The first one is actually called Monaco, monitoring as code, where I have integrated my Dynatrace, but Dynatrace is being automatically configured as part of that step. Then I have my deployment. This is where Helm comes in. Helm does the initial deployment. That's great. Then I have a validate step. Now in my validate step, I have a so-called generic executor service where I'm executing a shell script on a target environment that is basically just validating if the URL that was deployed by my deployment step can be reached. Now you may wonder, how does the URL get passed in? Well, my deployment was triggered. Then the Helm service says, I'm taking the job. And when the Helm service finished, it actually responded and said, hey, by the way, I've been working on this. I'm the Helm service. The deployment task, I just finished it with pass. So everything went smooth. But I have some additional information for you. Here is the URL that I deployed to. And there's even the git commit, right? So every tool can then define additional and enrich the event with more details. And then what Keptn really does, it will take this data that comes back from Helm, also from Monaco, it kind of collects the data and then pushes it on to the next task. In this case, validate. And in my case, validate has been handled by a tool that we have out there, the generic executor service. We also have the job executor. There's different things how you can trigger things. I really like the job executor now, but in this example, I have the generic. This one will then call a certain script, and it assumes that it just gets certain data like the deployment URL. And this is how I can then validate it. Now, what's next after validate? Release. I'm using Argo Rollouts here. So I've integrated Argo. So we have an Argo integration that is listening to that event, to that release task request, and is then doing a blue-green deployment. Right? Then we have a test event where I'm running some low-cost test, which is also pretty cool. Low-cost is one of the testing tools we see a lot. Then the evaluation kicks in. And if everything is fine, then it goes over to production, where in production, the way I phrased it is, I said, initially, I'm doing a delivery. So I'm deploying the new Helm chart, validate, test again, if everything works fine. And then I am using different canary phases where I'm always using release, the release task, to then let Argo rollouts go from 20% to 50% and so on and so forth. And in between, we always evaluate certain metrics. Now, you may wonder, this looks like a lot of magic. There must be a lot of configuration behind the scenes. Well, there is configuration, but not a whole lot. So if I go back to my Keptn overview, every project, as you can see here, behind the scenes has a Git repository. And you can set an upstream Git. Like in my case, I'm just using Git. It could be Bitbucket, it can be GitLab, it can be GitHub. But for every project, we basically keep a configuration repository where in the main branch, we have the shipyard file. This is the first thing you need when you create a new project. Now, remember earlier when I showed you the delivery sequence, here's a delivery sequence in the staging stage. And here I have Monaco, deployment, validate, release, test, evaluation, approval. This is all the process definition, right? That Keptn, if I go back again, go over here, go into my delivery sequence, right? If you remember, if I go back to staging, delivery sequence, Monaco, deployment, validate, release, test. Let me switch back. Delivery sequence, Monaco, deployment, validate, release, test, evaluation, approval. So you're specifying the process here, and Keptn is then orchestrating that process by sending events. Now, remember, these events need to be picked up by a tool that is listening to it, but we have a clear separation between process and tooling here, which is pretty cool because everything is event-based. You can subscribe to an event. I can have a different tool to configure my monitoring subscribed for one project, for one service, or for one environment than for the other. Right? So also a rollback sequence here that will be triggered on in case my staging delivery finished with a result fail, and then I call a rollback task. Rollback is then handled again with our Argo rollback integration. So really cool stuff that you can do it because you just specify the process. Now you may wonder, okay, where's all the other data? Where do the SLIs and the SLOs live? How do you know? How does Helm know what to deploy? Well, in this case, for every stage, for every automation stage, we always also have a branch. In here, we have subfolders for your automation services. Now remember, quickly go back to Keptn. In this demo rollout project, I have staging and prod, and I have a service that is called simple node, which means in my demo rollout Git repository under my staging branch, I have a simple node folder where I now have all the files that are relevant when a tool is participating in a particular automation step. Every tool that is participating, it's triggered by the event, can actually call back to Keptn and say, give me the files for that stage, for that project, for that service that belong to me. So for instance, here is where I have my Helm charts. Right? Here is where I have all of my Helm charts that will then be picked up by Helm. Or what else do I have? I have my low-cost test scripts there and here. Or I have my SLO YAML. This is where the SLOs are specified. And if I want to change that, I can change it here. Next time I run it, Keptn will automatically take this particular criteria. Right? So this is really powerful. And again, always what I like so much about it, we are not just providing you with another tool that can do call tool A, tool B, tool C, and then make a decision. First of all, the decisions, what's really powerful is the decision based on SLIs and SLOs. So you can pull in multiple metrics from your observability tool and it will automatically evaluate it. But then the real power, I believe, comes because we're not just calling a tool and we're forcing tools to have their own proprietary API. We are standardizing currently through the CDF, through the CD events, what the payload is for certain tasks to be executed. Because I know there's many delivery tools out there, there's many testing tools out there, many notification tools. They all have their own proprietary API. It's a pain for many tool vendors to build and to maintain these integrations, because every time a new version comes up of a particular tool you're already integrated with, chances are it breaks the API and then it breaks your scripts. We want to counter this by providing a standard on how we want to communicate with the different DevOps tools, deployment tools, testing tool, evaluation, notification. Right? So this is ongoing work, obviously, but this is kind of how this works, right? So I think for me, really powerful. Now, I want to quickly check in with Oleg if any questions came in so far, because I have not yet.
No, there is no unanswered questions. There were some follow-ups in Slack, but yeah, we are handling everything synchronously.
Okay.
And yeah, quite a lot of nice content.
Yeah, cool. Then let me show you a couple of more things. Let me quickly go back to my slides. What probably people know, well, who is adopting it? This is just a pet project, or is anybody adopting it? Well, I just bring you two that are relevant to CI/CD. Raiffeisen Software, they're the software company that builds most of the online banking software in Austria. They are using this. They're using this just evaluation capability right now, which means they have their Jenkins pipeline. They are deploying with Jenkins, they are testing with Jenkins, but then they're calling Keptn to evaluate their key metrics. There's also a nice blog article about it, and we also already had them on a Keptn user group. Another one, and this is another Keptn user group we had. This is kind of more what I've just shown you, is our friends from Volusion and Entity Data. So Artemis from Entity Data. They have basically built the multi-stage delivery pipeline using Keptn with Argo and JMeter and then Dynatrace and Helm, kind of similar to what I've shown you in my example, and really roll it out and then making decisions based on observability data. We also got some nice comments, and I think I've used this in the past because I really like it so much that at the core we have this concept of SLIs and SLOs, where we really make data-driven decisions, just as a human being would do, right? You deploy it and you look at your dashboard, your logs, and we just automate that for you. And we make it agnostic to your observability platform, right? Because we are using standardized events to then communicate with your tools. And this gives you all the options on where the data comes from. So act number 2, why we built Keptn. Why did we build Keptn? I know, Oleg, you have been obviously part of the Jenkins community for many, many years, so you know how powerful Jenkins is and other tools, and which means there's no shortage of options to build these pipelines or these orchestration workflows yourself. You can execute tests, add results, you can do all this stuff, right? Nobody keeps you from it. Yeah. But what we have... Sorry. Go ahead.
That's the question of how many resources you are ready to put to maintain that. Because even on this slide, you see probably too much Groovy script, and I'm a big fan of scripted pipeline in Jenkins, for the record.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it's difficult to maintain it, especially if you don't have experienced team that is ready to dedicate time on a continuous basis.
Exactly, and I also say, right, I also love the power that Jenkins and other tools give us. But I've also seen things like, coming to one of our colleagues now. I mean, he used to be working at ERT as a senior DevOps engineer. Now he's at Dynatrace, but when he was still at ERT, he used a different tool, yet he ended up with very complex and very long scripts, pipeline scripts that were hard to maintain. It was not just one script that was 1,000 lines long. It was many, right? And this is just very hard to maintain. And what happened to us internally at Dynatrace, and I brought this example many times, we are also a big Jenkins shop and have a lot of Jenkins pipeline. And when we moved to more microservice architectures, we obviously went with Jenkins years ago. We had kind of our standard template Jenkins pipeline. But then every team came in and said, hey, we need a different testing tool here. We want to have a different way to deploy. So then we modified it, and then we ended up with what we call the snowflake effect. And what we then did some pipeline code duplication analysis, and we saw that we had a high level of code duplication in these pipelines. Right, the same code, it was copy-pasted, but then also it was not maybe perfectly componentized so that you could reuse the same components, a lot of duplicated code. And this just makes it very hard to scale. And this is why the conclusion for us was the left side is great, but it doesn't scale. It's hard. You need a lot of resources. And this is why we needed a new approach with Keptn. So how does Keptn work? You saw it in action already, but let me explain again. Keptn really manages the life cycle of your orchestration. And what our initial thought was, looking at these examples I just brought, we know that a lot of you have these very lengthy pipelines, 1,000+ lines long, where you have hard-coded integrations for individual steps to a particular monitoring tool, to a particular deployment tool. Oleg mentioned itself, right? You saw a lot of too much config already, to also config files in the pipeline. And this is something that doesn't scale. And so we said, okay, what we need to do is we need to get rid of these dependencies. We need to separate the process on the left from the tooling on the right. We need to make sure that any configuration lives in Git, and that we then use eventing to connect the process, the tasks on the process, with the actual tooling. And to give you an example, even though you've seen it earlier, automating performance is a very common use case that people start with. So you would have on the left side, a sequence that's called performance in the staging, and then you have tasks, deploy, test, evaluate, and on the right side you have like these 4 tools: monitoring, deployment, testing, and notification tool. So you can trigger Keptn. You saw me earlier triggering it through the UI. You can also trigger such a sequence through the CLI or through an API. But basically what happens, Keptn will look at your definition. It says, hey, the first thing is a deployment. I'm taking all the information I have. I'm sending over an event, and then whichever tool is subscribing. And here's the cool thing already. You can see the deployment tool is subscribing to the deployment and says, yes, I can deploy in staging, and I know how to do blue-green. Let me deploy it. And it sends back when it's finished. But also a notification tool like Slack, what I had earlier, can subscribe to those events. And there's always 3 events. There's always a triggered for a task, a started, and a finished. So you can subscribe to any of those tasks and either decide to become active, saying, I want to do something and let me know when I start and when I'm finished. But you can also be more passive, kind of just listening and just doing something with it, like sending a notification to Slack. Right? But then once the first task is done, Keptn goes on, if everything is good, to test. Same thing, test gets executed, and then the evaluation kicks in. Now, we call the left side the shipyard. The definition of your sequences is defined in the shipyard file. The tools we call the uniform. The config goes into a config repo, and then the events are all cloud events with a specific payload and metadata. And this is, again, what we're currently standardizing through the CDF, through CD events special interest group. Just for completeness, even though you saw it earlier, second use case, automating the canary rollout. Just what I showed earlier. On the left, a different set of sequences. On the right, maybe you are adding different tools. And the thing is still the same. Keptn, trigger, canary rollout in a certain stage. Some additional metadata on top, like what image just came out of your CI. And then Keptn is following through, and it's just the same thing, just what we saw earlier, right? So from my perspective, Keptn brings opinionated cloud-native automation to all of your projects. So you can either do the left side or you can try the right side. The nice thing is it connects with all of your tools. We are not replacing any of your tools. That's very important. We are just connecting them, and we're bringing in the automated evaluation with the SLOs that's built in. And we're also standardizing now so that you don't have to go through the pain anymore in connecting all these tools. We're working very closely with our community. Things we're getting asked a lot, how does this integrate with Jenkins? We just had a great Keptn user group last week with Rene, who showed us how he was basically componentizing a large Jenkins pipeline and then Keptn orchestrating the individual pieces. We're getting a lot of questions about Argo and Flux. How does this work together? So here again, Argo CD is great for delivery, and therefore Keptn can trigger the delivery by triggering an Argo workflow to get the delivery done, and then does the testing. Another thing we've seen, if you're already great with, or if you're already good with Argo CD, detecting that a sync is necessary with your Git repository because something has changed, let Argo do its job of deployment, and then use the notification mechanism in Argo to then trigger the Keptn workflow, where Keptn can then do testing, evaluation, and if everything is good, can then promote that change into the next Git repository that again then kicks off your Argo workflow for the next. So the nice thing is you can really fit Keptn in as you see fit. In the ideal case, you have Keptn across and it's doing the end-to-end, but you don't have to, right? If you are comfortable with what you have, but you just need individual pieces like the automated testing, the automated evaluation, then start from there. I guess you can see for yourself, I always call it left side is this is a management slide, because it's nicely to see why you want to have a look in Keptn, because we've seen just a lot of improvement and a lot of less code, which means less technical depth potentially. So that's I think the benefit. So to sum it up here, and hopefully then there are some more questions. Keptn gives you SLO-driven automation. So whoever you are, pick your use case: quality gates, delivery, SRE automation, auto remediation. There's also other use cases. Remember in the very beginning, I talked about auto remediation. Bring your configuration. So bring your shipyard file, your SLIs, then your configuration of your specific tools, your Helm charts, your load testing tool, your load testing scripts, and then connect your tools to Keptn by letting those tools subscribe to the events, and then Keptn manages the rest through an event-driven approach. All right, so this is it. This is definitely the content that I wanted to get through. I also know I showed you some of the demos, and now I just want to see if there's any more questions. Oleg.
If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or in Slack, wherever I posted the link. I monitor everything. Well, at least I hope so. There is actually one question about how you deploy Keptn within a company, because we have continuous delivery for a single product, maybe, or for a single component, or maybe there are independent DevOps teams contributing for each component within a larger system. So basically, what would be your recommendation about deploying Keptn in the organization?
Yeah, so I've seen different things. So I have seen organizations where they have one Keptn, like I have here, and then the Keptn instance is shared with different development teams. Every development team, then, if I go back here, they may have different projects, so you can organize it by projects. That's one option. The drawback of this approach right now, and I'm saying right now because this has been worked on, is we are soon getting RBAC, role-based access control. Once we have role-based access control, then this approach is great. You have a central Keptn, and then you can give different users access to their different projects. Right now, it is once you have access to you see everything, right? But this is something that we're working on, and I think it's actually the first iteration of RBAC is coming very soon. The second thing, and I was just visiting some customers in Texas last week, or users, and what they have done, they provide an automated, I think in Azure, they're operating in Azure, and they were providing Terraform scripts where every development team can get their own Keptn instance on demand. They just can run their Terraform scripts, and then they're deploying Keptn on AKS. You can deploy multiple Keptns even on the same Kubernetes cluster, because the Keptn control plane itself, like you can see here, by default, it goes into the Keptn namespace. But what you can do is you can install multiple ones in different namespaces, and then you can separate it out like that. That's also what I've seen. And I really like the this customer or this user in Texas who just made a self-service. So every team can just get their own Keptn instance, and then they can do whatever they want. So I think these are the two options that I would go for. The third option, obviously, is, and this is just a little commercial here, but just really short, as Dynatrace, we also provide a hosted version of Keptn, not hosted version, let's call it, let's name it better. We are providing the capabilities of Keptn as part of our observability platform. So that means if you're a Dynatrace customer, then you can get this from us and you don't need to care about hosting it.
Nice. Thanks for the review. So yeah, another question was about what's next for Keptn. So what's your vision for that?
Well, there's a lot of things. I think what we are currently focusing on, or there's several areas. I think I mentioned RBAC. I mentioned some enterprise capabilities that a couple of enterprise organizations have asked us. Role-based access control is actually one of them. High availability. There's definitely some topics that are swirling around. For me, I'm very much looking forward to some of the improvements when it comes to auto remediation. So one thing that I don't have here, but projects from where you can call Keptn in case there's a problem, and then Keptn can execute a sequence of tasks to bring a system back to a healthy state, either by rolling back, by scaling up, by making configuration changes. And I know there's stuff coming there. I'm also very much looking forward to, there's a lot of improvements in the bridge. This is the UI. And I know there's many more coming, because what we've learned, initially we tried to make sure that our users can, automate Keptn. So we have a very strong API where you can really, automate everything, and you can, for instance, you can manage your projects and your services and your stages and all that, and you can also trigger, tasks. So, for instance, you can trigger an evaluation. You can trigger any type of event. What we're now doing and what we're seeing more and more is getting these capabilities into the UI. So for instance, one of those was what I showed you earlier, trigger a new sequence. You can now, as I mentioned, right, you can create new projects within a project. You can now also create services. So these are some of the things we're now bringing more and more into the UI. Another thing that I'm looking forward to, and this is what one of our colleagues is driving, is true GitOps, meaning being able to declare your state of Keptn, your projects, your services, your sequences, your tasks as CRDs in Kubernetes, and then we have an operator that then makes sure that Keptn has all this configuration, and then it's a true GitOps, because right now what you've seen here, this is Git based, meaning all the configuration is in Git. That's true, but in order to stand up this configuration, you still need to configure Keptn, right? Setting up the projects to the API. So this is one of the things we're doing here. And I also hope to see more integrations being built by the community, strengthening some of the integrations. We see a lot of demand on the Jenkins side to build and to improve our integration. We have a great Jenkins library, right? And I know, already this is a topic that we've discussed the last couple of weeks. There's some great stuff happening here, but we see a lot of users that are using Jenkins, and I think we have a lot to give, and we just need to make it easier for them to integrate their Jenkins pipelines. with Keptn.
Right. And just a quick disclaimer. So in the chat, I shared a link to Keptn roadmap. So the integrations section is not finished, as well as UI UX Andy mentioned before. So please come back maybe in 1 week, and there will be a lot more content there. Be sure there is a lot of contributions, and thanks a lot to all Keptn community members who work on integrations, because we receive, so last months we received more than 10 integrations, some from job executor service, some through webhook service, but also native integrations. And actually it helps the Keptn ecosystem to grow quickly. So thanks to everyone who adopts Keptn and extends it for their needs. Okay, there is another question in the chat. So do we have standard templates for services and for integrations with observability tools?
Yeah, so I think the best is if you go to Keptn Sandbox. This is where you find a couple of things. First of all, there's a Keptn service template for Go. So if you want to write your own integration, it's a so-called SLI provider. And I think the best way to get started is the Keptn service template Go. You can also look at, for instance, something like the DataDog service, how they've implemented it. By the way, you can also do it in Python. As you can see here, we have different templates. One of the things that I can also tell you is, and now I just need to remember Neotis Pack Keptn SLI provider, because I did a presentation on a custom SLI provider, and I provided the whole example. I think that's it. Exactly. So I basically built a sample SLI provider that was pulling data from a JSON file, and the whole code is here in my Pack SLI provider. I think that is something. Let me see if I can easily get this over to you, Oleg. This is this one, and then this is a presentation where I really showed like how the whole concept works of SLI providers, and then the reference implementation, and yeah, and then also writing your own SLI provider in 5 minutes. Super easy.
Yeah, also it was mentioning that now we have two generic integrations. So one is job executor service, Andy presented, another one webhook service. So if your observability tool has REST API, or if it has CLI, you can easily integrate by just creating a proper container, or just by passing a webhook, REST API call from Keptn. So there is a lot of opportunities and examples demonstrated. So, for example, Slack integration, etc. Well, Slack is not observability tool, but you can see the principles, how it works, and implement for your own tools.
Exactly.
Yeah, and last question about the integrations is: are there any is there an integration with Azure ADO?
With Azure DevOps, yeah, I think there's two things we have. I mean, there's an Azure DevOps extension out there that was built by a Dynatrace partner a while ago, and then it's currently being kind of reworked a little bit. But what we have seen is that most Azure DevOps users, most organizations are not kind of allowed somehow to just download third-party extensions from the Azure DevOps marketplace, and therefore most of them are just using bash scripts to just make calls to the Keptn CLI. And there's a couple of, I think Rob has a great selection, Rob Yan, one of our colleagues, a great selection of those PowerShell scripts that can then be integrated in Azure DevOps, just to kick it off. Yeah. So I would say the most common integration use case is just through a PowerShell script that is making a simple REST call to Keptn to trigger a sequence. And if you want to know more, jump on the Keptn Slack channel and ask in the integrations Slack channel, and we can give you the answers.
Yes. So just join Keptn Slack. I shared the link before in the chat. And if you want to try something and do not know what to do, there is a help channel where you you get added to it by default, and we will assist you to find proper information and discussion channels. Okay, so we are on time, and yeah, I don't have any questions in my backlog as far as I can tell. So thanks a lot, Andy, for the presentation. Yeah, it's really comprehensive, and nice to see both use cases for Keptn.
Yeah.
So for everyone who is going to KubeCon, we will have a Keptn booth there. All the days we will also have project office hours on Thursday. It's already announced on the community chapter, which the link I also shared. And there will be more events like Bug Bash, and also we participate in CD Events Day, so this specification referenced. So if you go to KubeCon, definitely you can meet us there, and we are happy to chat about Keptn and maybe do some presentations and live demos if you want.
Cool. All right, I need to jump. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And if you're interested to subscribe to our CNCF chapter, we do at least 2 presentations every month. User group with great case studies from our users, and also there are developer meetings. Tomorrow we do a GitOps working group meeting. So if you want to manage GitOps with Keptn, or if you want to use Keptn together with other services, also join us. There's a lot of discussions. And yeah, see you on Slack, or just comment on YouTube. We will also follow up there. So thanks a lot.